Did this extremely popular Western ride off into the sunset with gamers, or did an itchy trigger finger end the adventure far too soon? Let's find out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm BD, and this is Did Anyone Play? A series where we investigate, analyze, and determine the truth about how much gamers have actually played the game in question. A reminder that we aren't concerned about sales numbers or popularity. This is not a review, and all games are treated equally in our analysis. We always let the data do the talking, and our goal is to learn, keep an open mind, and hopefully find out the truth about our favorite games and the gamers that play them. Drop a like or a sub to the channel if you want more of these types of videos, and a quick spoiler warning to anyone concerned as we may be talking about elements of late game progression. So let's find out if anyone actually played Red Dead Redemption 2. First, a quick overview. Red Dead 2 is an action-adventure game where the focus is on the exploits of Arthur Morgan. Arthur is an outlaw and a member of a gang, and the player must navigate the declining American West while partaking in deeds, good and bad, that are available in the sprawling open world that Red Dead 2 provides. The game released on October 26th of 2018 for Xbox and PlayStation. Now we can look at the launch conditions. We are going to go over our four main launch factors: pedigree, competition, hype, and reviews. But let's keep it 100. This is Rockstar, and this is Red Dead. I'm not going to waste your time. Pedigree is strong. Rockstar is a gaming industry juggernaut. Competition was a bit interesting because some major releases around October 26th of 2018 were Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Fallout 76, and Forza Horizon 4. But even though this might sound like strong competition, all these games stayed far away from Red Dead 2's release date. Pretty much everyone did, so direct competition was actually low. How about hype? Well, Google Trends surprised me, because while Red Dead 2 in blue had strong hype, no question, Fallout 76 was actually higher. That's interesting, we may want to look at that game soon. But because of the distance other games kept from Red Dead 2, hype was still very strong for the release. Finally, we check out the reviews. Metacritic has Red Dead 2 at an incredible score of 97. The game received perfect scores from a huge number of outlets. At the 2018 Game Awards, it won for Best Audio Design, Narrative, Music, and Best Performance. It also won Game of the Year from many others. Safe to say, the reviews were strong. Alright, now that we better understand the game and the launch conditions, we can continue our analysis to determine if anyone played Red Dead Redemption 2. To do this, we select 5 distinct milestones from the game. These are represented by trophies and achievements that help to evaluate player progress and player retention. We then compare the results for these milestones against our Did Anyone Play or DAP database. As always, we choose 2 early milestones, a mid-game milestone, a crucial game completion milestone, and finally a rare milestone to help us see the full picture. Since there was a partnership with PlayStation in terms of marketing, we will be using PlayStation as our main platform for Red Dead 2 analysis. Milestone 1 is called Just a Scratch, and a player achieves this for completing the tutorial. For this mission, Arthur has to defend John from wolves as he transports an injured gang member off the mountain. For PlayStation, we find that 79% of players who started Red Dead 2 made it to this first milestone. It's a bit surprising that 20% of players who started the game never finished the tutorial mission, but we'll take note of this and move on. For Milestone 2, we have Back in the Mud. This is awarded for completing Chapter 1. It cannot be missed as players progress through the game. So how many players ended up completing this milestone? 68.8%. So after reaching the end of Chapter 1, we've lost another 10% of players. Moving on to Milestone 3, our mid-game milestone is called Washed Ashore. To achieve this milestone, the player must finish Chapter 4. So how many players stayed with the game until Milestone 3 on PlayStation? 34.8%. Alright, so what about finishing the game? The always crucial Milestone 4, called Endless Summer, is awarded for completing the main quest for Red Dead. Just so we're clear, this is the epilogue mission, and not simply the completion of Chapter 6. Checking on how many players finished Red Dead 2 on PlayStation, we see that 26.5% were awarded this milestone. So Red Dead 2 lost nearly 75% of players by the end on PlayStation. Finally, the rare Milestone 5 chosen for Red Dead 2 is called Gold Rush. This is achieved if the player can earn 70 gold medals in story missions. A player can replay any mission, but to get gold, the game requires that all objectives for a mission are completed in a single round. This is definitely a grind you have to be committed to, and on PlayStation, only 0.1% of players achieve this very rare milestone. So this is our final tally for Red Dead 2 PlayStation milestones. Of course, that's just the start, because now we can use those numbers and figure out how Red Dead 2 stacks up against everything else, and find out if anyone truly played this game using the database and our best friend percentiles. A quick note, I'm not going to teach you all about statistics, but to make it simple, we have created 6 percentile rankings, with bronze being the lowest played ranking and legend being the highest played ranking. An easy way to understand percentiles is to say if a game reaches the legend rank, then it is in the 95th percentile, meaning it scored better than 95% of all other games in the database. The beautiful thing about this method is that as we add more and more games and results to our database, the analysis only grows in power and accuracy. Now let's deal with the question we all want to know the answer to. Did anyone play Red Dead 2 on PlayStation? To determine if anyone played a game, we have to evaluate how the percentage of players that finished the game compares to a larger sample size of all types of games. For Red Dead 2 on PlayStation, 26.5% of players completed the story. Knowing this and applying it to our percentile rankings in the database, we can calculate what ranking Red Dead 2 gets. Here we go. And there you have it. We know Red Dead 2 on PlayStation achieved a gold ranking, which means the game performed above industry average and better than 50% of all other games. In other words, a decent amount of people played Red Dead 2 on PlayStation. But now we can go further, because we also have Xbox and Steam results for these milestones for Red Dead 2. A quick note for this new data from Steam: Red Dead 2 released a year later for Steam on November 5th of 2019, and for Xbox, Red Dead 2 did eventually become available on Game Pass in 2020 for about 4 months. Graphically, we represent PlayStation in blue, Steam in red, and Xbox in green. We have also added the DAP database averages for each milestone in gray for comparison purposes. All 3 start at 100% and show how they progress. Here's the data laid bare in our raw milestone progression chart. So what exactly do we see in the data? Well, at milestone 1, Steam starts out strong, outperforming PlayStation. Xbox is a bit of a surprise, where almost 40% of players did not finish the tutorial level. Milestone 2 trends show about the same curve for everybody, but when we reach milestone 3, we see that PlayStation has passed Steam for the best hold on retention. The critical milestone 4 is where we see that Xbox pulls out a great hold at the very end to have it line up well with Steam. PlayStation continues to hold a slim lead for milestone 4. Finally, with our rare milestone 5, Steam jumps way ahead of both PlayStation and Xbox, giving it the best final player retention. Now we can determine the ranking on Xbox and Steam using our database comparison, and we see that Red Dead 2 on Xbox achieves a gold rating, same as PlayStation, meaning above the industry average, and Steam a year later also achieves gold, so a decent amount of people played Red Dead Redemption 2 across all platforms. Now there's a lot to unpack here, and we can tease out some other observations by looking at the results in a different way. It's time for the deep dive. Let's start with progressive player loss. Each milestone shows how many total players have stopped playing the game at that particular point. Steam starts off strong and PlayStation a close second. For Xbox, we see a larger drop than we would expect for a game of this caliber, close to 39% of players gone on that platform before the end of the tutorial mission. Not much change as we move to milestone 2, but as we move deeper into the game, at milestone 3 we see a change. PlayStation has lost the least amount of players, and Steam has caught up with Xbox, or perhaps Xbox loss slowed down. Milestone 4 shows that PlayStation stayed the strongest through the story, and Steam and Xbox are near identical. Moving on to another view of the data we can use is milestone player retention. This calculation only takes into account player population loss as compared to the previous milestone and shows it as a percentage. This ignores previous milestone loss so we can look at each milestone transition individually and avoid certain data bias. What the data shows us here is that while Xbox loses the most in milestone 1, we see that for milestone 2, 3, and 4, it's actually Steam that is losing the most players at each stage of gameplay. PlayStation, for those same milestones, lost the least amount of players by percentage. But how about completionists? How did the rarest milestones shake out on different platforms? Here we can see that Steam dominated the rare milestone accomplishment. PlayStation and Xbox showings were both very poor. Finally, we can check on early versus late game retention. When you read a chart like this, the best performers are further away from the center of the circle. So if we look at our early milestone performance, we see clear separation between the platforms, with Steam and PlayStation showing strong, and Xbox clearly behind. Endgame retention has PlayStation moving on top, with Xbox a very close second, and Steam now trailing. And finally, at completion, we see that Steam is out in front of the other platforms. Let's take one final look at all the platforms and milestones ranked in full. Please take note that this comparison only works with the same game and the same milestones. It would not be valid to compare different games on early or mid-game milestones, as their properties can drastically vary from game to game. Remember that milestone 4 is where we really determine if anyone played the game, because it's the main story completion marker. But still important are the earlier milestones that show if a game really hooked the gamers. For Red Dead Redemption 2, PlayStation starts strong in gold and stays there throughout the story. Steam is very similar, starting in gold and ending in gold. Xbox is a bit more interesting, where we begin in bronze but get stronger and hold on to players so by the end, it's also achieving a gold ranking. Another interesting note for Steam is that only on that platform did players engage in the rare milestones, as both Xbox and PlayStation are unranked for milestone 5. Let's wrap this up. So what are our major takeaways from all the data? Player retention between platforms did vary, but they all ended up with a gold ranking. That's great to see the consistency across platforms, but it does raise a bit of a question. Why did Red Dead Redemption 2 only achieve a gold ranking? It's only above industry average. It's only better than 50% of all other games. That's not really the outcome you would expect with this type of game, developer release, and reception. But the data doesn't lie. It seems that Red Dead 2 is in line with other slightly above average games in the industry. Was there something that held this game back from being a juggernaut in player retention and not just sales? Another interesting data point is that the large drop in players on Xbox before the tutorial mission is completed. Could this still be an impact from Game Pass, or are we seeing a trend forming from the Xbox gaming community? Steam releasing a year after PlayStation and Xbox had no impact on player retention, which is great, and while other platforms had their ups and downs, PlayStation player retention was strong and stable throughout all story milestones for the game. But a special shout out to Xbox, because even though it had the large drop at the first milestone, it did battle back and retain players really well in the later stages of the game. Red Dead Redemption 2 is considered an all-time classic. It launched with weak competition because everyone was afraid, and for good reason. Great reviews and big-time hype followed this game everywhere. And the results from PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam show that people did play Red Dead 2. It didn't reach the highest rankings in our database, and that might come as a shock to some. It did to me, as I'd always gotten the feeling based on media that this was a game not to be missed. And while gamers did play it, it also lost a lot of gamers along the way. What caused that disconnect that kept far more players from experiencing and finishing Red Dead 2 than we would expect? I have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours. Hopefully, this information can inform future developers who can look at how Red Dead 2 connected with some players and lost others and work to improve on this result. Ultimately, the goal for game developers is to have people experience their game. We should always want to see hard work rewarded, celebrated, and fully experienced by the gaming community. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to do all the YouTube support stuff. I'd love to read any comments you have down below. What conclusions did you all take from this data? And of course, feel free to suggest the next game we should look at to determine if anyone played it. Until then, take care of yourself and each other.